At 25, I never imagined that cleaning champagne glasses at Sheikh Al-Rashid's Dubai mansion would lead to the most humiliating and ultimately life-changing moment of my existence. My name is Amira, and for 3 years, I scrubbed marble floors, polished golden fixtures, and silently observed $1 million deals being signed in his opulent office. But when he mocked me in front of international investors, offering me $100 million as a cruel joke to solve an impossible mathematical equation, he had no idea he was speaking to the secret daughter of Harvard's greatest financial genius. What I discovered about my true identity would not only shock him to his core, but completely destroy and rebuild his entire Middle Eastern empire. If you're watching this video and have ever been underestimated because of your background, drop a comment with the word genius, and subscribe to see how I turned the Sheikh's mockery into the sweetest revenge that changed thousands of lives forever. The crystal chandelier above the Sheikh's mahogany conference table cast dancing shadows across the faces of 12 of the world's wealthiest men. I moved silently between them, refilling crystal glasses with imported French champagne, my black uniform making me nearly invisible against the dark wood paneling. The air was thick with expensive cologne and cigar smoke, while Arabic and English conversations about oil futures and real estate investments floated around me like whispers from another world. Sheikh Al-Rashid sat at the head of the table, his salt and pepper beard, perfectly groomed, diamond-encrusted watch catching the light as he gestured dramatically. At 55, he commanded respect from every person in that room: billionaires who controlled shipping empires, tech moguls, and oil barons. His deep voice carried the authority of someone who had never been told no in his entire privileged life. "Gentlemen," he announced, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against a leather folder, "the Moroccan mining project requires a complex algorithm to predict optimal extraction points. Our MIT consultants have been working on this equation for 6 months. He pulled out a sheet filled with intricate mathematical formulas, Greek symbols dancing across the page like a foreign language. "They say it's unsolvable with current computational methods." As I leaned over to refill his glass, my eyes inadvertently glanced at the paper. The equation was a variation of multivariable calculus applied to geological modeling, something I had seen before, though I couldn't remember where. My hand trembled slightly as I poured, a single drop of champagne hitting the marble floor with a soft ping. "Careful, girl," Sheikh Al-Rashid snapped, not even looking at me. "That bottle costs more than your monthly salary." The other men chuckled, their laughter sharp and dismissive, but then something shifted in his expression. A cruel smile spreading across his face as he noticed my lingering gaze on the mathematical formula. "You seem fascinated by our little problem," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The entire room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. "Tell me, how long did you study at university before becoming a maid?" Heat rushed to my cheeks. I attended 2 years at University of Rabi, before ... I stammered, knowing I couldn't mention the real reason I had to drop out: my mother's illness, the unpaid medical bills, the desperate migration to Dubai seeking work. 2 years, he exclaimed, turning to his guests with theatrical amazement. "Gentlemen, we have a scholar among us." The room erupted in cruel laughter. "Perhaps she can solve our $100 million problem better than MIT's finest minds." One of the investors, a portly man with gold teeth, leaned forward. "How much would we save if someone actually solved this?" "The optimization would save approximately $100 million in unnecessary excavation," Sheikh Al-Rashid replied, then turned back to me with malicious glee. "So here's my offer, little scholar. If you can solve this equation that has stumped the best mathematicians in America, I'll give you the $100 million we would save, right here, right now." The room exploded with laughter, men slapping the table and wiping tears from their eyes. But something deep inside me stirred not anger, but a strange, familiar recognition. The numbers on the page began to shift and dance in my mind, patterns emerging like constellations in a clear desert sky. May I look at it more closely?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "By all means," he gestured grandly, sliding the paper across the polished table. "Take all the time you need. We have nowhere to be for the next 6 months." I picked up the paper with trembling fingers, and suddenly the room around me disappeared. The equation was indeed complex, but it wasn't unsolvable, it was incomplete. The MIT consultants were missing a crucial variable that would account for underground water flow patterns. My mind raced, pulling from memories I didn't even know I possessed, mathematical concepts that felt as natural as breathing. Without asking permission, I picked up the Mont Blanc pen and began writing. The silence in the room was deafening as I added variables, rearranged formulas, and integrated multiple calculation methods. My hand moved with confidence I didn't know I had, symbols flowing across the page like music. 3 minutes and 47 seconds later, I set down the pen and stepped back. Sheikh Al-Rashid's face had gone completely white. He grabbed the paper, his hands shaking as he studied my work. One by one, the other investors leaned in, their expressions shifting from amusement to shock to something approaching. This is impossible," whispered the oil baron from Kuwait, his voice barely audible. "She's not only solved it, she's identified the flaw in the MIT approach and created an entirely new optimization model." But what none of them knew in that moment was that this wasn't my first encounter with advanced mathematics. What they couldn't see was the genetic gift that flowed through my blood, inherited from a man I had never met but whose brilliance had shaped my very DNA. What they didn't understand was that their cruel joke had just awakened something that had been sleeping inside me for 25 years, a legacy that would soon turn their world upside down. The next morning, I woke before dawn in my tiny studio apartment in Dubai's Old Quarter. The memory of the previous evening playing on repeat in my mind like a fever dream. Had I really solved $100 million equation in front of the most powerful men in the Middle East? Had Sheikh Al-Rashid actually promised me that money, or was it all an elaborate humiliation that would end with my termination? The call came at 6:30 a.m., just as I was preparing my simple breakfast of flatbread and tea. An unknown number with a UAE country code. Amira Hassan. The voice was crisp, professional, speaking Arabic with a British accent. "Yes, this is she. My name is James Morrison. I'm calling from Morrison & Associates Legal Services in London. I represent the estate of Dr. Hassan Al-Mansur. We've been trying to locate you for 7 years." The flatbread fell from my fingers, landing on the cracked linoleum floor. That name Al-Mansur, I had heard it whispered by my mother during her final days, when morphine loosened her tongue and old secrets tumbled out like water through a broken dam. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake," I said, sinking onto my single chair. "Is your mother Fatima Hassan, originally from Meknes, Morocco?" My throat constricted. She passed away 3 years ago. "I'm deeply sorry for your loss. Miss Hassan, I have documents here that indicate you are the daughter of Dr. Hassan Al-Mansur, who died in 2018. He was a professor of financial mathematics at Harvard University, and he left specific instructions regarding his estate." The room began to spin. My mother had always claimed my father was a taxi driver who died in an accident before I was born. She'd never mentioned Harvard, never mentioned mathematics, never mentioned anything that would explain why solving complex equations felt as natural to me as breathing. "This is impossible," I whispered. "I understand this must be overwhelming." Dr. Al-Mansuri was quite specific in his will. He acknowledged that he had a relationship with your mother in Morocco in 1998. And that he suspected he might have a child. He left detailed instructions that if you were ever located, you would inherit his research, his patents, and a substantial financial legacy. My hands were shaking so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. "How much?" "The current value of his intellectual property portfolio is approximately $47 million. But Miss Hassan, there's something else, something that might explain your mathematical abilities. Your father was considered one of the greatest financial minds of his generation. His algorithms are still used by major investment banks worldwide." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for over an hour, watching the Dubai sunrise paint my small apartment in shades of gold and amber. Everything I had believed about myself, about my origins, about my limitations, had just crumbled like a house built on sand. But as the shock began to fade, a new emotion took its place. Anger. Because if my father had been this renowned mathematician, if I had inherited his abilities, if there was a $47 million legacy waiting for me, then what had my mother and I suffered through all these years of poverty? Why had she cleaned houses until her hands bled, while her daughter scrubbed floors for men like Sheikh Al-Rashid? I reached for my laptop, a second-hand device I'd bought with 3 months of savings, and began researching Dr. Hassan Al-Mansur. The internet revealed a brilliant academic career, published papers on algorithmic trading, revolutionary work in financial modeling, consulting contracts with major corporations, and my blood turned to ice as I read the final articles about his career. In 2015, Dr. Al-Mansuri had accused a Dubai-based investment firm of stealing his proprietary algorithms. He'd spent 3 years in legal battles, trying to prove that his intellectual property had been used without permission to generate billions in profits. The company he'd accused, Al-Rashid Financial Holdings. The sheikh hadn't just humiliated me by accident. The man I'd been serving champagne to, the man who had mocked my intelligence and offered me money as a cruel joke, was the same person who had destroyed my father's life and stolen his legacy. But then something even more shocking emerged as I dove deeper into the legal documents available online. The algorithms that Al-Rashid Financial Holdings had allegedly stolen weren't just any mathematical models, they were the exact same optimization techniques I had instinctively used to solve the mining equation the night before. My father's genius hadn't just been inherited, had been weaponized against the very man who had destroyed him. That afternoon, I stood in the marble foyer of Al-Rashid's mansion, my usual cleaning supplies in hand, but my mind churning with possibilities. Everything looked different now. The opulent paintings weren't displays of wealth. They were trophies stolen from my family's rightful inheritance. The golden fixtures weren't symbols of success. They were monuments to my father's betrayal. "You're late," snapped Mrs. Khalil, the sheikh's wife, as she descended the curved staircase. Her jewelry clicked softly against her silk dress, each diamond probably worth more than my father had earned in his final struggling years. "My apologies, madame," I replied, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "My husband told me about your little performance last night," she continued, her tone dripping with disdain. "Don't think solving one equation makes you special. You're still just the help." But as she walked away, her high heels clicking against the marble, I caught a glimpse of something that made my heart stop. On the console table by the entrance sat a framed photograph. Sheikh Al-Rashid, shaking hands with a distinguished man in academic robes. The nameplate read, "Partnership signing with Dr. Hassan Al-Mansuri, Harvard University, 2014. My father's face stared back at me from that photograph, his proud smile frozen in time, completely unaware that the man whose hand he was shaking would soon become his destroyer. But there was something else in that image that sent chills down my spine. I had inherited not just his mathematical genius, but his exact facial features. The resemblance was unmistakable. Sheikh Al-Rashid had been looking at my father's face every day for years and never realized he was employing his victim's daughter. But what he didn't know was that this discovery had just transformed me from a victim into something far more dangerous. A woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost haunting the sheikh's mansion, moving through his private spaces with purpose beyond mere cleaning. My new legal identity as Dr. Al-Mansur's heir gave me access to documents I'd never dreamed of seeing: bank records, patent applications, and most importantly, communications between Al-Rashid Financial Holdings and Harvard University from 2014 to 2017. The picture that emerged was even more devastating than I had imagined. My father hadn't just been robbed, he had been systematically destroyed through a carefully orchestrated campaign of corporate espionage and legal manipulation. The sheikh had initially approached him as a potential partner, inviting him to Dubai for collaborative discussions about implementing his algorithms in Middle Eastern markets. But instead of forming a partnership, Al-Rashid had recorded their private conversations, stolen his research materials, and then used his vast legal resources to tie my father up in courts across multiple countries. The most heartbreaking discovery came in a series of emails I found in the sheikh's personal computer while he was attending Friday prayers. In 2016, my father had written desperate letters to former colleagues, begging for character references, as Al-Rashid's lawyers systematically destroyed his professional reputation. One email, sent to a colleague at MIT, read, "They have taken everything from me: my research, my patents, even my ability to publish. I fear I may never recover from this professionally. My only regret is that I will never meet my daughter in Morocco. Her mother deserves so much better than the broken man I have become." Through tears that blurred my vision, I photographed every document, every email, every piece of evidence that proved not only the theft of intellectual property, but the personal destruction of a brilliant man who had died believing himself a failure. But the sheikh's cruelty extended beyond my father. The same pattern repeated with at least 6 other international academics over the past decade. Brilliant minds, lured to Dubai with promises of collaboration, only to have their work stolen and their careers destroyed. Al-Rashid Financial Holdings had built its entire empire on intellectual theft. and my father was just one victim in a long line of academic casualties. As I compiled this evidence, a plan began forming in my mind. The Sheikh had offered me $100 million as a joke, never intending to pay. But what he didn't realize was that the algorithms he had stolen from my father were worth far more than that. They were the foundation of his entire business model. And as his legal heir, I didn't just want compensation, I wanted justice. The revelation that would change everything came on a Thursday afternoon while I was cleaning the Sheikh's private study. Hidden behind a collection of rare books was a safe, and tucked beneath the safe was a small leather journal that had apparently been forgotten for years. The journal belonged to Sheikh Al-Rashid himself, written in Arabic, in his distinctive handwriting. What I read made my hands shake with rage and disbelief. The entries from 2014 detailed his initial meeting with my father, not as a business opportunity, but as a carefully planned theft. The Moroccan professor is brilliant, but naive. One entry read, his trust in verbal agreements will be his downfall. By the time he realizes what has happened, we will have implemented his algorithms across our entire operation. But the most damning entry came from 2017. Dr. Al-Mansuri died yesterday in a car accident in Cambridge. The news reports suggest he was distracted, possibly by stress. I cannot say I feel guilty. In business, only the strongest survive. And he was too weak to protect what he had created. My father hadn't died of natural causes, as I had been told. He had died broken, destroyed by the man who now employed me to clean his toilets and serve his guests champagne. That night, I didn't return to my apartment. Instead, I sat in a 24-hour cafe in downtown Dubai, surrounded by late-night workers and insomniacs, planning the most audacious revenge in corporate history. Because I had realized something that would turn the Sheikh's world upside down. The algorithms he had stolen weren't just valuable, they were flawed. My father's original work contained a critical error that he had discovered just before his death, but he never had the chance to publish the correction. For 7 years, Al-Rashid Financial Holdings had been using faulty models, and their apparent success was built on a mathematical house of cards that could collapse with the right pressure. But I knew how to fix the algorithms. More than that, I knew how to use the corrected versions to expose every fraudulent transaction, every stolen innovation, and every academic career destroyed by Sheikh Al-Rashid's greed. The only question was whether I had the courage to walk into that mansion tomorrow and destroy the most powerful man in the Middle East. But, as I stared at my reflection in the cafe window, I saw not just my own face, but my father's eyes staring back at me. And I realized that I didn't have a choice. I had a responsibility. The next morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that only comes after making an irreversible decision. I dressed in my usual black uniform, but underneath I wore the gold necklace my mother had given me, the only valuable thing she had ever owned. And now I understood it had probably been a gift from my father. When I arrived at the mansion, I could hear voices coming from the Sheikh's private study. Through the partially open door, I glimpsed him in heated discussion with his son, Tariq, a 30-year-old Harvard Business School graduate who had always treated me with more respect than the rest of the family. Father, the quarterly reports don't make sense, Tariq was saying, his voice strained with frustration. Our algorithms are showing massive profits, but when I cross-reference with actual market performance, there are discrepancies everywhere. You question methods that have made us billions. Sheikh Al-Rashid replied sharply, I question methods I don't understand. These financial models, where did they come from originally? I took a deep breath and knocked on the doorframe. Excuse me, sir, might I have a word? Both men turned, surprise flickering across their faces. In 3 years of employment, I had never interrupted a family discussion. This is not the time, the Sheikh began, but I stepped forward anyway. Actually, I believe I can answer your son's question about the algorithms, I said, my voice steady. Despite my racing heart, Tariq's eyebrows rose. You know about our financial models. I know about them because my father created them, I replied, pulling out my phone and showing them the legal documents I had received from London. My name is Amira Al-Mansuri, and I am the daughter and sole heir of Dr. Hassan Al-Mansuri. The color drained from Sheikh Al-Rashid's face so quickly I thought he might faint. He grabbed the edge of his desk, knuckles turning white, his breath coming in short gasps. That's impossible, he whispered. What's impossible is that you've been using stolen intellectual property for 7 years, I continued, pulling out printed copies of his own journal entries. What's impossible is that you destroyed my father's life, drove him to his death, and then employed his daughter as your maid without ever realizing the resemblance. Tariq looked between us, confusion and dawning horror playing across his features. Father, what is she talking about? I turned to him, my voice gentler now. Your father built this empire by stealing academic research and destroying the careers of brilliant professors. My father was just one of many victims, but he was the most valuable because his algorithms became the foundation of your entire business model. This is slander, Sheikh Al-Rashid managed to say, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? I pulled out my laptop and connected it to his large desktop monitor, because I have something that will interest both of you. You see, the algorithms you've been using contain a critical flaw that my father discovered just before his death. For 7 years, your brilliant investment strategy has been based on faulty mathematics. On the screen, I displayed a side-by-side comparison, the original algorithms that Al-Rashid had been using, and the corrected versions that I had developed using my father's posthumously discovered notes. The error is in the risk assessment matrix, I explained, my finger tracing the differences on screen. Your models have been systematically underestimating market volatility by approximately 23%. You haven't been making brilliant investments. You've been extraordinarily lucky that the markets haven't collapsed in the right way to expose the flaw. Tariq leaned forward, his business education allowing him to grasp the implications immediately. If this is true, then our entire portfolio is built on a mathematical illusion, I finished. But here's what's interesting, I can fix the algorithms. In fact, I already have. And when I implement the corrections, every fraudulent transaction, every stolen innovation, every academic career destroyed by this company will become visible to financial regulators worldwide. Sheikh Al-Rashid sank into his leather chair, the weight of 30 years of criminal success suddenly crushing down on his shoulders. What do you want? What do I want? I repeated, feeling my father's spirit flowing through my words. I want justice for every professor whose life you destroyed. I want recognition for my father's genius, and I want to rebuild this company into something that honors innovation instead of stealing it. But what I said next would shock them both to their cores, because my demands weren't just about money or revenge. They were about transformation. I don't want your $100 million, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. I want something far more valuable. I want to become the Chief Technology Officer of Al-Rashid Financial Holdings. I want to implement my father's corrected algorithms legitimately. I want to establish a foundation that provides scholarships for mathematics students from Morocco and other developing countries. And I want a public acknowledgement of my father's contributions to this company's success. Tariq stared at me with something approaching admiration. You're not seeking revenge, he said slowly. You're seeking revolution. I'm seeking what my father never had the chance to achieve, I replied. I'm seeking to turn stolen brilliance into genuine innovation. Sheikh Al-Rashid looked up at me with eyes that held fear, respect, and something that might have been relief. And if I refuse? I smiled, pulling out a USB drive that contained copies of all the evidence I had gathered. Then tomorrow morning, this information goes to the Dubai Financial Services Authority, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, Harvard University's Legal Department, and the International Journal of Financial Mathematics. Your empire will collapse within a week, and you'll spend the rest of your life in courts across 3 continents. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of Dubai traffic below. 3 lives hung in the balance to Sheikh's legacy, his son's future, and my father's posthumous vindication. There's one more thing, I added, my voice soft but firm. I want you to personally write a letter of apology to every family member of every academic you've destroyed. I want you to acknowledge what you did, and I want you to commit to making amends. Tariq suddenly spoke up, his voice filled with newfound determination. Father, she's offering us a chance at redemption. We can choose to be remembered as thieves, or we can choose to be remembered as the people who made things right. Sheikh Al-Rashid looked at his son, then at me, and for the first time in our 3-year acquaintance, I saw something almost human in his eyes. You would work with the man who destroyed your father, he asked quietly. I would work with the man who's ready to honor my father's memory, I replied. But make no mistake, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for every brilliant mind that comes after us, so they never have to choose between their dignity and their survival. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Then Sheikh Al-Rashid reached for his pen, and I knew that my father's legacy and my own future was about to be rewritten. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of Dubai's International Financial Conference, wearing a tailored business suit instead of a maid's uniform, addressing an audience of the world's leading economists and mathematicians. The nameplate in front of me read Dr. Amira Al-Mansuri, Chief Technology Officer, Al-Rashid Financial Holdings. The algorithms I am presenting today, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the conference hall, were originally developed by my father, Dr. Hassan Al-Mansuri, of Harvard University. For too long, his contributions to financial mathematics were hidden, stolen, and unacknowledged. Today, we not only correct that injustice, but we advance his work to create more ethical and transparent financial modeling. In the audience, I could see Sheikh Al-Rashid sitting in the front row, his expression unreadable but his presence itself a testament to the transformation we had both undergone. Beside him sat Tariq, who had become not just my business partner but my strongest advocate for reform within the company. The Al-Mansuri Foundation for Mathematical Excellence had already awarded its first 50 scholarships to promising students from Morocco, Tunisia, and other North African countries. The foundation's headquarters, established in a renovated wing of the Al-Rashid building, bore a bronze plaque with my father's photograph and his most famous quote, "Mathematics is the language of justice. It cannot lie, it cannot be corrupted, and it will always reveal the truth." But perhaps the most meaningful change was personal. 3 months earlier, I had traveled to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to visit my father's grave for the first time. The headstone was simple, bearing only his name and dates, but I had arranged for an addition: "Beloved father, brilliant mathematician, and champion of academic integrity, your legacy lives on through your daughter." As I concluded my presentation at the conference, describing how the corrected algorithms had not only improved the company's performance but also enabled us to identify and compensate other victims of intellectual property theft, I felt a presence that I could only describe as my father's spirit. The standing ovation lasted for 7 minutes, 1 minute for each year my father had been gone, and each year I had unknowingly prepared for this moment. But the greatest victory came afterward, during the question and answer session. When a young Moroccan mathematics student approached the microphone, "Dr. Al-Mansuri," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I am one of your foundation's scholarship recipients. My question is not about mathematics, but about courage. How did you find the strength to transform your pain into purpose?" I looked out at the audience, at the faces of academics and business leaders who were witnessing the birth of a new model for corporate responsibility, and I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from a maid scrubbing floors to a doctor revolutionizing an industry. I found strength in remembering that brilliance is not diminished by circumstances. I replied, "My father's genius was never dependent on recognition or wealth. It existed in the purity of his ideas, in his commitment to truth, and in his belief that mathematics could make the world more just." When I realized I carried that same fire inside me, I understood that I had a choice. I could let his legacy die with him, or I could use my inherited gifts to create the world he had dreamed of. As the conference ended and people began to filter out, Sheikh Al-Rashid approached me. The man who had once mocked me as an uneducated maid now extended his hand with something that looked remarkably like respect. "Your father would be proud," he said simply. "Yes," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "He would be, and more importantly, he would be amazed to see how his daughter turned his destroyer into his greatest advocate." 6 months later, Al-Rashid Financial Holdings had been transformed from a company built on stolen brilliance into a model of corporate ethics and academic collaboration. We had returned millions of dollars to the families of exploited researchers, established partnerships with universities worldwide, and created an open-source platform where mathematical innovations could be shared and properly credited. But the most satisfying moment came on a quiet Thursday evening, as I was reviewing foundation applications in my corner office, the same room where I had once been humiliated as a maid. Tariq knocked on my door, holding a newspaper. "You need to see this," he said, his face bright with excitement. The headline read, "Dubai-based Al-Mansuri Foundation, named Most Innovative Academic Initiative by International Education Council." Below, it was a photograph of me receiving the award. But what caught my attention was the subtitle, "Daughter Transforms Father's Stolen Legacy into Global Force for Educational Justice." Your father's story is inspiring a whole new generation of young mathematicians. Tariq continued. Harvard University wants to establish the Hassan al-Mansouri Chair in Ethical Financial Mathematics. MIT is creating a new program in intellectual property protection for academics, and 3 other companies have approached us about implementing our transparent research collaboration model. I set down the newspaper and walked to my window, looking out at the Dubai skyline, where cranes and construction reflected a city always building, always reaching higher. But now I saw something different in those towers, not just monuments to wealth, but potential symbols of honest achievement and collaborative success. There's something else, Tariq added quietly. My father asked me to give you this. He handed me a small leather journal, the same one I had found hidden behind his books months earlier. The one containing his confessions about my father's destruction. He wants you to have it, Tariq explained, as a reminder of how far we've all come. I opened the journal to find a new entry, written in the Sheikh's distinctive handwriting. To Dr. Amira al-Mansouri. Your father was a man of extraordinary brilliance and integrity. I was a man of extraordinary pride and greed. He deserved better from this world, and you deserved better from me. I cannot undo the past, but I can dedicate my remaining years to ensuring that no other brilliant mind suffers as his did. Your forgiveness has taught me that true strength lies not in taking what belongs to others, but in lifting others to heights we could never reach alone. May your father's legacy, channeled through your courage and wisdom, continue to transform lives for generations to come. As I closed the journal, my phone buzzed with a message from James Morrison, the London lawyer who had first contacted me about my inheritance. The message was brief but life-changing. Dr. Almans, we have just received confirmation that your father's original patent applications, which were blocked during the legal disputes, have been reinstated and recognized internationally. The intellectual property rights to his algorithms have been officially transferred to you. Current estimated value, $340 million. Congratulations on vindicating your father's legacy. I sat down slowly, the magnitude of this final victory washing over me. Not only had I transformed my father's destroyer into his advocate, not only had I used his stolen brilliance to create a force for global good, but I had also secured legal recognition of his genius for all time. But perhaps the most meaningful notification came an hour later, an email from the young Moroccan scholarship recipient, who had asked me about courage at the conference. Dr. Al-Mansouri, I wanted you to know that I have been accepted to Harvard University's mathematics program with a full scholarship. They specifically mentioned that my application essay about your father's story and your foundation's work was what convinced them to take a chance on a girl from a small village outside Marrakesh. I will be the first person in my family to attend university, and it is because you showed the world that brilliance can come from anywhere, and that justice, though delayed, is never denied. I hope to honor your father's memory by using my education to lift up other young women who, like us, have been underestimated because of where we came from. I leaned back in my chair and smiled, remembering the moment 6 months ago when Sheikh Al-Rashid had mockingly offered me $100 million to solve an impossible equation. He had no idea that his cruel joke would awaken not just my inherited genius, but my inherited determination to ensure that brilliance is recognized, honored, and shared rather than stolen and hoarded. As the Dubai sun set outside my window, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber that reminded me of the desert landscapes of my childhood in Morocco, I realized that my father's story, our story, had become something greater than revenge or justice or even mathematical breakthrough. It had become proof that legacy is not diminished by death, that brilliance cannot be permanently buried, and that sometimes the most powerful transformation comes not from destroying our enemies, but from converting them into champions of everything we stand for. My father had died believing himself a failure, never knowing that his greatest achievement would be the daughter who inherited not just his genius, but his unshakable belief that mathematics, like justice, will always reveal the truth. And in the end, the truth had set us all free. If you believe that no matter how humble your beginning, your brilliance deserves recognition and respect, comment justice below. If this story inspired you to never give up on your dreams despite setbacks, comment courage. And if you want to hear more stories of people who transformed their pain into purpose, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Remember, sometimes the most powerful revenge is not destroying your enemies, but proving that your light shines brighter than their darkness ever could.